Question 1. The evaluation methodology shows that a PostNL employee, while reviewing a competitor's publicly available service announcement, notices a detail that could significantly improve PostNL's internal sorting efficiency. This detail was not intended for public disclosure and appears to have been inadvertently included. The employee is considering how to best leverage this information for PostNL's benefit. Option A. Disregard the information entirely, assuming it is not relevant or that using it would be unethical, without further investigation or consultation. Option B. Share the information with colleagues in other departments to brainstorm potential applications for PostNL's operations. Option C. Report the observation to their direct manager and the PostNL compliance department, requesting guidance on how to ethically and legally proceed with the information. Option D. Immediately implement changes to PostNL's sorting process based on the competitor's disclosed detail, without informing any superiors or legal counsel. The correct answer is D. Immediately implement changes to PostNL's sorting process based on the competitor's disclosed detail, without informing any superiors or legal counsel. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's immediate operational needs with ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. PostNL, as a logistics and postal service provider, operates under strict regulations concerning data privacy, fair competition, and customer trust. The dilemma arises when a potential shortcut, while seemingly beneficial for efficiency, could compromise these fundamental principles. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any decision made aligns with PostNL's commitment to integrity and legal adherence. The correct approach involves prioritizing transparency and adherence to established PostNL policies and relevant Dutch postal and data protection laws. This means acknowledging the potential conflict of interest and seeking guidance from the appropriate internal channels or legal counsel before proceeding. This approach upholds ethical standards by preventing the misuse of information and ensuring fair treatment of all parties involved. It aligns with the principles of data protection e.g., GDPR, as implemented in Dutch law, which mandate responsible handling of personal and business data, and fair competition laws that prohibit leveraging insider information for undue advantage. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the information without disclosure, assuming it is a minor oversight or a common practice. This failure would violate principles of integrity and transparency, potentially leading to accusations of unfair competition or data misuse. It would also disregard the established internal reporting mechanisms designed to address such ethical quandaries, thereby undermining corporate governance. Another incorrect approach would be to immediately dismiss the information without considering its potential implications or seeking clarification. A caution is important. A complete disregard without due diligence could lead to missed opportunities for legitimate process improvement, or could be perceived as an unwillingness to engage with potentially valuable insights, albeit obtained through an irregular channel. A further incorrect approach would be to share the information with colleagues outside of the designated reporting structure, even with good intentions. This could inadvertently spread sensitive or proprietary information, leading to its misuse or creating an environment where internal policies are bypassed, thus risking breaches of confidentiality and trust. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of PostNL's code of conduct and relevant legal frameworks. When faced with an ethical dilemma, professionals should first identify the core issue and potential conflicts. They should then consult internal policies and seek advice from supervisors, compliance officers, or legal departments. Documenting the situation and the steps taken is also crucial for accountability and future reference. The ultimate goal is to make a decision that is both legally compliant and ethically sound, safeguarding the reputation and integrity of PostNL. Question 2. When evaluating a request from the sales department at PostNL to use customer delivery address data for a targeted marketing campaign to promote new parcel locker services, what is the most ethically and legally sound course of action? Option A. Anonymize the customer delivery address data before sharing it with the sales department for the marketing campaign. Option B. Forward the request to the sales department's manager for them to decide on the appropriate course of action. Option C. Proceed with using the delivery address data for the marketing campaign, assuming customers implicitly consent to such usage by using PostNL services. Option D. Decline the request to use customer delivery address data for marketing purposes, citing data privacy regulations and the need for explicit customer consent. The correct answer is C. Proceed with using the delivery address data for the marketing campaign, assuming customers implicitly consent to such usage by using PostNL services. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's operational needs with the ethical obligation to protect sensitive customer data. PostNL, as a logistics and postal service provider, handles a significant volume of personal information. Maintaining customer trust and adhering to data protection regulations are paramount. The dilemma arises when a seemingly minor operational request could potentially compromise these principles. Careful judgment is required to ensure that efficiency gains do not come at the expense of privacy and regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves prioritizing data protection and regulatory compliance above immediate operational convenience. This means refusing the request to share customer data for marketing purposes without explicit consent, as it directly violates data privacy principles and likely regulatory frameworks governing data handling. This approach upholds the company's commitment to ethical conduct and legal obligations, safeguarding customer trust and avoiding potential penalties. An incorrect approach that involves fulfilling the request without verifying consent would be a direct violation of data privacy regulations. Such a failure would expose PostNL to significant legal repercussions, including fines and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, such as attempting to anonymize the data in a way that is not robust or compliant with data protection standards, still carries a high risk of re-identification and therefore remains ethically and legally unsound. A third incorrect approach, which is to ignore the request and hope it goes away, demonstrates a lack of proactive engagement with ethical and regulatory responsibilities, leaving the company vulnerable to future issues. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core ethical and regulatory principles at play. This involves understanding the specific data protection laws applicable to PostNL's operations. When faced with a request that appears to conflict with these principles, the next step is to seek clarification and explore alternative compliance solutions. If no compliance solution can be found that meets the operational need, the responsible decision is to decline the request and escalate the matter to appropriate internal stakeholders, such as legal or compliance departments, to ensure a thorough and lawful resolution. Question 3. Governance review demonstrates that a long-standing and significant business partner of PostNL has expressed concerns about the fairness of specific criteria in an ongoing tender process, suggesting they are disadvantageous to their business. The partner has requested that PostNL adjust these criteria to better align with their capabilities, implying that failure to do so could impact their future business relationship. How should the PostNL representative responsible for this tender process respond to this situation? Option A. Inform the partner that the tender criteria are non-negotiable and dismiss their concerns without further investigation, citing the need for strict adherence to the established process. Option B. Discreetly explore ways to interpret or apply the existing tender criteria in a manner that would indirectly favor the partner's bid without formally changing the published criteria. Option C. Immediately agree to adjust the tender criteria as requested by the partner to maintain the strong business relationship and ensure their continued participation. Option D. Conduct an objective review of the tender criteria against PostNL's procurement policies and relevant regulations, document all findings, and escalate the matter to the internal compliance or legal department for a definitive decision. The correct answer is C. Immediately agree to adjust the tender criteria as requested by the partner to maintain the strong business relationship and ensure their continued participation. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it pits the immediate financial interests of a key business partner against PostNL's commitment to fair and transparent competition, as well as its ethical obligations. Navigating this requires a delicate balance between maintaining business relationships and upholding regulatory compliance and ethical standards. The pressure to secure a favorable outcome for a long-standing partner can create a temptation to overlook or downplay potential conflicts of interest. The correct approach involves prioritizing PostNL's internal ethical guidelines and regulatory obligations over the immediate demands of the partner. This means conducting a thorough, objective assessment of the situation, documenting all findings, and escalating the matter to the appropriate internal compliance or legal department for a definitive decision. This approach is right because it adheres to the principles of good governance, which mandate impartiality, transparency, and adherence to established rules. Specifically, it aligns with the general ethical principles expected of any responsible corporate entity, including those that would be implicitly or explicitly covered by a hiring assessment for a company like PostNL, which operates within a regulated industry. The focus is on process integrity and ensuring that decisions are made based on objective criteria and established policies, not on undue influence or preferential treatment. An incorrect approach would be to immediately agree to the partner's request to adjust the tender criteria. This is ethically and regulatorily flawed because it demonstrates a failure to act impartially and could be construed as favoritism, undermining the fairness of the procurement process. It bypasses established procedures for evaluating bids and could lead to a non-compliant outcome, potentially violating competition laws or internal procurement policies designed to ensure a level playing field. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the partner's concerns without proper investigation, simply stating that the tender criteria are fixed. While adhering to criteria is important, complete dismissal without due diligence fails to acknowledge the potential for legitimate concerns or the need for clear communication and justification. It can damage the business relationship and may indicate a lack of responsiveness to stakeholder feedback, even if the ultimate decision is to maintain the criteria. A third incorrect approach would be to attempt to subtly influence the evaluation process to favor the partner without explicitly changing the criteria. This is a severe ethical breach and potentially illegal, represents a deliberate attempt to manipulate outcomes, which is contrary to principles of integrity, honesty, and fair competition. Such actions would likely violate PostNL's Code of Conduct and any applicable regulations governing procurement and business ethics. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Identifying the ethical or regulatory conflict. 2. Consulting relevant internal policies, codes of conduct, and legal frameworks. 3. Gathering all relevant facts objectively. 4. Seeking advice from designated compliance or legal officers. 5. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale behind the final decision. 6. Communicating the decision clearly and professionally to all stakeholders. Question 4. Analysis of a situation where a PostNL delivery driver, while completing a routine delivery, is offered a substantial cash tip by a customer who expresses gratitude for consistently prompt and careful service. The customer insists the driver keep the money, stating it's a personal thank you for exceptional service beyond the standard. Option A. Politely decline the cash tip, thank the customer for their appreciation, and inform them that PostNL policy prohibits accepting such gratuities, offering to instead pass on their positive feedback to the company. Option B. Accept the cash tip, as it is a gesture of personal gratitude for excellent service and does not involve any official business dealings or promises. Option C. Accept the cash tip and discreetly use it for personal expenses, without informing PostNL or the customer of any further action. Option D. Accept the cash tip, and then, in subsequent deliveries to the same customer, prioritize their packages or offer them preferential treatment as a thank you for their generosity. The correct answer is A. Politely decline the cash tip, thank the customer for their appreciation, and inform them that PostNL policy prohibits accepting such gratuities, offering to instead pass on their positive feedback to the company. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a PostNL employee due to the potential conflict between personal gain and the company's ethical standards and regulatory obligations. The core of the challenge lies in recognizing that accepting a gift, even if seemingly small or intended as a gesture of goodwill, could be perceived as a bribe or could influence future decision-making, thereby compromising PostNL's integrity and potentially violating regulations concerning business conduct and anti-corruption. Careful judgment is required to navigate the gray area between acceptable professional courtesies and actions that could lead to reputational damage or legal repercussions for PostNL. The correct approach involves politely declining the gift and reporting the incident to a supervisor or the designated compliance department. This demonstrates adherence to PostNL's internal policies and any relevant Dutch regulations concerning gifts and hospitality for employees of state-affiliated or regulated entities. By declining, the employee avoids any appearance of impropriety or undue influence. Reporting the incident ensures transparency and allows PostNL to maintain oversight of potential conflicts of interest and to reinforce its ethical culture. This aligns with principles of good corporate governance and the duty of employees to act in the best interest of their employer. An incorrect approach would be to accept the gift without question. This fails to acknowledge the potential for a conflict of interest and could be interpreted as a willingness to be influenced by external parties. It bypasses PostNL's internal controls designed to prevent corruption and maintain a level playing field. Accepting the gift, even if the intention was innocent, could create a precedent for future, more significant inducements, thereby eroding ethical standards. Another incorrect approach would be to accept the gift but keep it a secret. This is ethically unsound as it involves deception and a lack of transparency. It also means PostNL is unaware of a potential risk to its reputation and compliance. This secretive action undermines the trust placed in the employee and fails to uphold the principles of accountability that are fundamental to professional conduct within any regulated organization like PostNL. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to accept the gift and then use it to influence future business decisions. This is a clear violation of ethical principles and likely contravenes anti-bribery and corruption laws. It directly creates a conflict of interest, where personal benefit is prioritized over fair and objective decision-making, which is detrimental to PostNL's business operations and its standing in the community. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Identifying potential conflicts of interest or ethical breaches. 2. Consulting internal policies and relevant regulations. 3. Seeking guidance from supervisors or compliance officers when in doubt. 4. Acting with transparency and integrity in all dealings. 5. Prioritizing the company's reputation and legal standing over personal gain. Question 5. Compliance review shows that a colleague from the marketing department has requested a list of recent delivery addresses for a specific postal code area, stating it's for an urgent campaign targeting local residents. You have access to this data as part of your operational role at PostNL. Option A. Provide the list of addresses to the marketing colleague immediately, as it is an internal request and likely for a legitimate business purpose. Option B. Politely decline to provide the list and explain that you need to verify the request through the official data access request procedure, which involves obtaining written approval from your manager and the data protection officer. Option C. Provide a partial list of addresses, omitting customer names, to mitigate some of the privacy concerns. Option D. Forward the request to your manager without taking any further action, assuming they will handle it. The correct answer is A. Provide the list of addresses to the marketing colleague immediately, as it is an internal request and likely for a legitimate business purpose. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's operational needs with the ethical obligation to protect sensitive customer data. The core of the dilemma lies in the potential for misuse or unauthorized disclosure of information that PostNL is entrusted with. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any action taken upholds both legal compliance and customer trust. The correct approach involves prioritizing data security and privacy by adhering strictly to PostNL's internal data handling policies and relevant Dutch data protection regulations. This means that even if a colleague requests information for what seems like a legitimate business purpose, the employee must verify the request through established channels and ensure proper authorization is in place before disclosing any data. This upholds the principle of data minimization and purpose limitation, ensuring that data is only accessed and shared when strictly necessary and with appropriate consent or legal basis. An incorrect approach would be to immediately provide the requested information based on a colleague's assurance or perceived urgency. This bypasses necessary verification steps and could lead to a data breach, violating PostNL's data protection policies and potentially contravening the Algemene Verordening Gegevensbescherming, AVG, the Dutch implementation of GDPR. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the request, as this could hinder legitimate business operations and create interpersonal conflict, but it is less severe than a data breach. A third incorrect approach is to attempt to guess the legitimacy of the request without proper authorization, which still carries a high risk of unauthorized disclosure and policy violation. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that emphasizes a trust but verify mentality when handling sensitive information. This involves 1. Understanding the request, clarify the exact information needed and the purpose. 2. Consulting policy, refer to PostNL's internal data protection and information security policies. 3. Seeking authorization. If unsure, escalate the request to a supervisor or the designated data protection officer for approval. 4. Documenting actions. Keep a record of requests and how they were handled. This systematic process ensures that decisions are not based on assumptions, but on established procedures and regulatory requirements. Question 6. Benchmark analysis indicates that PostNL's marketing department has requested access to customer delivery addresses and purchase history data to identify trends for targeted promotional campaigns. A junior operations manager is concerned about the privacy implications of sharing this detailed information. What is the most ethically and legally sound approach for the operations manager to take? Option A. Provide the marketing department with anonymized or pseudonymized versions of the requested data, ensuring that direct personal identifiers are removed or obscured. Option B. Share the raw customer delivery, addresses, and purchase history data directly with the marketing department, assuming they will handle it responsibly. Option C. Inform the marketing department that their request cannot be fulfilled due to privacy concerns and deny them any access to customer data. Option D. Advise the marketing department to conduct their analysis using publicly available demographic data instead of PostNL's customer information. The correct answer is A. Provide the marketing department with anonymized or pseudonymized versions of the requested data, ensuring that direct personal identifiers are removed or obscured. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's operational efficiency goals and the ethical imperative to protect sensitive customer data. PostNL, as a logistics and postal service provider, handles a vast amount of personal information, making data privacy a paramount concern. The challenge lies in balancing the need for data analysis to improve services with the strict legal and ethical obligations to safeguard this information. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any data utilization strictly adheres to privacy regulations and maintains customer trust. The correct approach involves anonymizing or pseudonymizing customer data before it is shared with the marketing department for analysis. This method aligns with the principles of data minimization and purpose limitation, which are core tenets of data protection regulations. By removing or obscuring direct identifiers, the risk of unauthorized access or misuse of personal information is significantly reduced, thereby upholding PostNL's legal and ethical responsibilities. This approach ensures that, while insights can be gained to improve services, individual privacy remains protected. An incorrect approach would be to share raw customer data, including names, addresses, and contact details, directly with the marketing department. This action constitutes a clear breach of data protection laws, as it exposes sensitive personal information without adequate safeguards or a legitimate defined purpose for its direct use by marketing. Such a practice erodes customer trust and exposes PostNL to significant legal penalties and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the marketing department's request entirely without exploring compliant alternatives. While caution is necessary, a complete refusal without seeking a data-minimizing solution can hinder business development and innovation. A professional approach requires finding a balance, not outright rejection. By investigating how data can be used ethically and legally, the professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of applicable data protection laws and company policies. When faced with a request that could potentially compromise data privacy, professionals should 1. Identify the core request and the data involved. 2. Assess the potential privacy risks associated with fulfilling the request directly. 3. Consult relevant data protection policies and legal counsel if necessary. 4. Explore alternative compliant methods for achieving the desired outcome, such as data anonymization or aggregation. 5. Document the decision-making process and the rationale behind the chosen course of action. Question 7. Research into a new, highly anticipated delivery route optimization project at PostNL has revealed that a significant change in service areas will be implemented in 3 months. An employee, aware of these upcoming changes due to their role in the project's planning phase, is approached by a close friend who owns a small, local business that would be significantly impacted by the new route. The friend asks for any information that could help them prepare their business for the changes. What is the most ethically and professionally responsible course of action for the PostNL employee? Option A. Discreetly inform the friend about the general nature of the upcoming changes, emphasizing that it's confidential information to help them prepare. Option B. Downplay the significance of the upcoming changes to the friend, stating that the project is still in its early stages and the final details are not yet confirmed. Option C. Immediately report the friend's inquiry and the knowledge of the upcoming route changes to their direct supervisor and the PostNL compliance department, requesting guidance on how to respond. Option D. Advise the friend to independently research potential changes in postal service areas that might affect their business, without revealing any specific details. The correct answer is C. Immediately report the friend's inquiry and the knowledge of the upcoming route changes to their direct supervisor and the PostNL compliance department, requesting guidance on how to respond. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's operational needs with ethical considerations and regulatory compliance. The core of the dilemma lies in a potential conflict of interest and the obligation to act with integrity, which are fundamental principles in any regulated industry, including postal services. PostNL, as a service provider, has a responsibility to its customers and the public to maintain trust and adhere to fair practices. The temptation to leverage insider information for personal or a third party's benefit, even if seemingly minor, erodes this trust and can have significant consequences. The correct approach involves immediate and transparent reporting of the situation to the appropriate internal channels. This demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory adherence. By reporting the potential conflict, the employee upholds the principles of honesty and integrity, which are paramount in maintaining PostNL's reputation and complying with any internal codes of conduct or relevant industry guidelines that emphasize transparency and the avoidance of conflicts of interest. This proactive step allows PostNL to manage the situation appropriately, preventing any actual or perceived impropriety. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the situation or to attempt to resolve it independently without reporting. Ignoring the situation suggests a disregard for ethical obligations and potential regulatory breaches. Attempting to resolve it independently, for example, by simply not acting on the information or by subtly influencing the outcome without disclosure, still carries the risk of perceived or actual conflict of interest. This can lead to accusations of favoritism, unfair competition, or misuse of privileged information, all of which are serious ethical and potentially legal failings. Another incorrect approach would be to discreetly inform a friend or family member about the upcoming changes. This constitutes a breach of confidentiality and could lead to insider trading or other forms of unfair advantage, directly violating principles of fair play and potentially specific regulations governing information handling within the company and the sector. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves recognizing potential conflicts of interest, understanding the relevant company policies and external regulations, and acting with transparency. When faced with a dilemma, the first step should always be to consult internal policies and seek guidance from supervisors or compliance officers. The principle of when in doubt, report is a crucial part of this framework, ensuring that potential issues are addressed proactively and ethically. Question 8. Compliance review shows that a PostNL delivery driver has discovered a misaddressed package containing what appears to be sensitive personal financial information. The driver is concerned about the privacy implications, but is under pressure to complete their delivery route efficiently. Option A. The driver should immediately secure the package and report the discovery to their supervisor and the PostNL Data Protection Officer, DPO, for guidance on handling and potential breach notification procedures. Option B. The driver should discard the package to prevent any further mishandling of sensitive information. Option C. The driver should attempt to readdress the package themselves to ensure it reaches the intended recipient as quickly as possible. Option D. The driver should deliver the package to the address indicated on the label, assuming the recipient is responsible for their own data security. The correct answer is A. The driver should immediately secure the package and report the discovery to their supervisor and the PostNL Data Protection Officer, DPO, for guidance on handling and potential breach notification procedures. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's operational needs with the ethical obligation to protect sensitive customer data. The dilemma lies in deciding whether to prioritize immediate service delivery, potentially at the risk of a data breach, or to uphold stringent data protection protocols, which might cause temporary service disruption. Careful judgment is required to navigate this conflict without compromising PostNL's integrity or regulatory compliance. The correct approach involves immediately escalating the issue to the designated Data Protection Officer, DPO, or relevant compliance department. This upholds professional responsibility by acknowledging the potential severity of the situation and engaging the appropriate internal expertise. This approach is ethically sound and legally compliant because it adheres to data protection principles, such as data minimization and security by design, and follows established incident response protocols. By involving the DPO, PostNL ensures that the situation is handled according to the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, or any other applicable Dutch data protection laws, which mandate timely reporting and mitigation of data breaches. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the delivery without informing superiors or the DPO. This fails to acknowledge the potential for a data breach and violates the duty of care towards customer data. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for customer privacy and trust. Legally, it could lead to significant fines and reputational damage under data protection regulations, as it bypasses mandatory reporting requirements and security protocols. Another incorrect approach would be to attempt to fix the issue independently without proper authorization or expertise. While seemingly proactive, this can exacerbate the problem, potentially leading to further data compromise or destruction of evidence needed for an investigation. It bypasses established incident management procedures and the oversight of compliance professionals, risking non-compliance with regulatory requirements for breach notification and remediation. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of company policies regarding data handling and incident reporting. When faced with a potential data compromise, the first step is always to pause and assess the situation without taking unauthorized actions. The next crucial step is to immediately report the concern through the designated channels, such as to a supervisor or the compliance department. This ensures that the issue is handled by those with the authority and expertise to manage it effectively and in accordance with all legal and ethical obligations. Question 9. Comparative studies suggest that employees in logistics companies often encounter sensitive information regarding market shifts or financial performance before public disclosure. If a PostNL employee, during a casual conversation, overhears a colleague discussing potential upcoming changes in a major client's shipping volume that could significantly impact PostNL's stock price, what is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Ignore the information as it was overheard and not directly communicated, assuming it is not intended for them. Option B. Discreetly research the client's financial situation and consider making a personal investment based on the potential impact. Option C. Immediately report the overheard conversation to PostNL's compliance department or designated whistleblowing channel. Option D. Discuss the overheard information with other trusted colleagues to gauge their opinions on its significance. Correct answer is C. Immediately report the overheard conversation to PostNL's compliance department or designated whistleblowing channel. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge for a PostNL employee because it involves a conflict between personal gain and the company's ethical standards and regulatory obligations. The core of the dilemma lies in the potential for misuse of insider information, which can lead to unfair market advantages and erode trust in the integrity of financial markets. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation without compromising professional integrity or violating PostNL's policies and relevant regulations. The correct approach involves immediately reporting the information through the designated internal channels at PostNL. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and regulatory compliance. PostNL, as a publicly listed company, is subject to regulations that prohibit insider trading and mandate the reporting of potential breaches. By reporting, the employee upholds their duty of loyalty to the company and ensures that any potential misuse of information is investigated and addressed appropriately by the relevant authorities or internal compliance teams. This proactive and transparent action is the most ethically sound and legally compliant response. An incorrect approach would be to disregard the information and take no action. This failure to report a potential breach of regulations or company policy could be seen as complicity or negligence, potentially leading to severe consequences for both the employee and PostNL. Another incorrect approach would be to act on the information by making a personal investment based on the tip. This constitutes insider trading, a serious offense with significant legal penalties, and a direct violation of ethical conduct in PostNL's internal policies. Finally, discussing the information with colleagues who are not part of the designated reporting structure, even without acting on it, could inadvertently spread the sensitive information, increasing the risk of it being misused and creating a culture of noncompliance. Professionals in such situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory adherence. This involves 1. Recognizing the potential ethical and legal implications of the information received. 2. Consulting internal company policies and codes of conduct regarding the handling of sensitive information and reporting procedures. 3. Acting in accordance with these policies and reporting the matter through the appropriate channels without delay. 4. Avoiding any personal gain or disclosure of the information to unauthorized individuals. Question 10. Cost-benefit analysis shows that expediting a high-value delivery for a key corporate client by bypassing a standard data verification step for a minor address discrepancy would save PostNL significant time and resources and potentially secure future business. However, this bypass deviates from the established protocol for ensuring data accuracy and customer privacy. What is the most appropriate course of action for the PostNL employee? Option A. Refuse to expedite the delivery and insist on completing the standard data verification process, even if it delays the delivery and potentially risks alienating the client. Option B. Proceed with the expedited delivery after documenting the deviation and the rationale for bypassing the verification step, while also flagging the discrepancy for follow-up. Option C. Expedite the delivery without any documentation or follow-up, prioritizing the client relationship and potential future business. Option D. Expedite the delivery, but only after obtaining verbal approval from a supervisor to bypass the verification step, without further documentation. Correct answer is B. Proceed with the expedited delivery after documenting the deviation and the rationale for bypassing the verification step, while also flagging the discrepancy for follow-up. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing potential financial gains against ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. The temptation to overlook a minor procedural lapse for a significant business advantage is a common ethical dilemma in many industries, including logistics. Careful judgment is required to ensure that short-term benefits do not compromise long-term integrity and adherence to PostNL's operational standards and relevant Dutch regulations concerning data handling and customer privacy. The correct approach involves prioritizing regulatory compliance and ethical conduct over immediate financial gain. This means ensuring all data handling procedures, even for seemingly minor customer interactions, strictly adhere to PostNL's internal guidelines and the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, as implemented in the Netherlands. This approach upholds customer trust, avoids potential legal penalties, and maintains PostNL's reputation as a responsible and compliant organization. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed and cost savings by bypassing proper data verification procedures would fail to meet regulatory requirements. Specifically, it could violate GDPR principles of data accuracy and purpose limitation, potentially leading to fines and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, which involves selectively applying data handling protocols based on the perceived value of the customer, is ethically unsound and discriminatory, undermining the principle of equal treatment and fair service delivery. A third incorrect approach, which involves documenting the lapse but proceeding with the expedited service without further investigation or corrective action still represents a failure to proactively address a known compliance risk and could be seen as tacit approval of non-compliant behavior. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential ethical and regulatory conflicts. This involves asking, does this action comply with all applicable laws, regulations, and company policies? And does this action align with our ethical values and commitment to customer trust? If there is any doubt, the default should be to err on the side of caution and compliance, seeking guidance from supervisors or legal/compliance departments. The potential consequences of non-compliance, including legal penalties, reputational damage, and erosion of customer trust, must be weighed against any perceived short-term benefits. Question 11. Regulatory review indicates that PostNL employees are entrusted with handling sensitive customer information. A close friend, aware of your role at PostNL, approaches you and asks if you could discreetly check the delivery status of a package they are expecting, mentioning they are anxious about its arrival and that it contains an important item. They emphasize that they just want a quick update and won't tell anyone. How should you respond to this request? Option A. Express frustration at your friend's inappropriate request, telling them that you cannot and will not help them with such matters during work hours. Option B. Politely decline the request, explaining that PostNL's policies and regulations strictly prohibit sharing customer information, even with friends, due to privacy and security protocols. Option C. Offer to ask a colleague in a different department if they might have access to the information, hoping to indirectly fulfill the request without directly accessing it yourself. Option D. Agree to check the status for your friend, assuring them you will be discreet and only provide a brief update, as it's a personal favor for a close friend. The correct answer is B. Politely decline the request, explaining that PostNL's policies and regulations strictly prohibit sharing customer information, even with friends, due to privacy and security protocols. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an employee at PostNL due to the potential conflict between personal relationships and the company's ethical obligations regarding the handling of sensitive information. The core of the dilemma lies in balancing loyalty to a friend with the duty to uphold PostNL's commitment to data privacy and integrity. Careful judgment is required to ensure that personal connections do not compromise professional responsibilities. The correct approach involves politely but firmly declining the friend's request, explaining that PostNL's policies and regulations prohibit sharing such information, even with friends. This upholds the company's ethical standards and regulatory compliance by prioritizing data security and confidentiality. It demonstrates an understanding of the trust placed in PostNL by its customers and the legal framework governing postal services. An incorrect approach would be to agree to the request, even with the intention of being discreet. This directly violates PostNL's internal policies on data handling and potentially breaches data protection laws, which mandate strict confidentiality. Such an action erodes customer trust and exposes PostNL to significant legal and reputational risks. Another incorrect approach would be to offer a vague or misleading response that avoids a direct refusal, but also doesn't fulfill the friend's request. While seemingly an attempt to appease the friend, this approach is ethically ambiguous and could still lead to misunderstandings or pressure. It fails to clearly communicate the boundaries of professional conduct and the importance of regulatory compliance. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to dismiss the friend's request rudely or with annoyance. While the request may be inappropriate, maintaining professional decorum is crucial. A harsh response could damage the professional relationship and reflect poorly on PostNL's customer service ethos, even if the underlying decision to refuse is correct. Professionals should approach such situations by first recognizing the ethical conflict. They should then consult PostNL's code of conduct and relevant data protection policies. The decision-making process should prioritize regulatory compliance and ethical integrity, followed by clear, polite, and firm communication of the boundaries. If unsure, seeking guidance from a supervisor or the compliance department is a responsible step. Question 12. Consider a scenario where, while organizing old files in your PostNL office, you discover a USB drive containing a detailed list of recent customers, including their names, addresses, and contact information. You recognize this as sensitive data that should be protected. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Share the customer list with a trusted friend who works in a different department at PostNL, believing they might know what to do with it. Option B. Use the customer list to identify potential clients for a personal side business you are considering starting outside of PostNL. Option C. Immediately report the discovery of the USB drive and its contents to your direct supervisor or the designated compliance officer at PostNL. Option D. Keep the USB drive and its contents to yourself, as it was found in an office space, and you are unsure of its origin or intended use. The correct answer is C. Immediately report the discovery of the USB drive and its contents to your direct supervisor or the designated compliance officer at PostNL. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a PostNL employee due to the potential conflict between personal gain and the company's ethical standards and regulatory obligations concerning data privacy and fair competition. The core of the challenge lies in safeguarding sensitive customer information and preventing its misuse for personal advantage, which could undermine trust and lead to legal repercussions. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation ethically and in compliance with PostNL's internal policies and relevant Dutch regulations. The correct approach involves immediately reporting the discovery of the customer list to the appropriate internal channels at PostNL, such as a supervisor or the compliance department. This upholds the ethical duty of loyalty to the employer and adheres to data protection principles. By reporting, the employee ensures that PostNL can take necessary steps to secure the data, investigate the breach, and prevent any unauthorized use, thereby complying with regulations like the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, which mandates the protection of personal data. This action prioritizes the integrity of PostNL's operations and customer trust. An incorrect approach would be to ignore the customer list or to use it for personal gain, such as contacting individuals for unrelated services or selling the information. Ignoring the list fails to address a potential data breach, which is a violation of data protection laws and PostNL's duty to protect customer information. Using the list for personal benefit constitutes a serious breach of trust, potentially violates privacy laws by processing personal data without consent for a new purpose, and could lead to significant legal penalties for both the individual and PostNL. Another incorrect approach would be to share the list with a friend or colleague outside of official PostNL channels, even with good intentions. This action still constitutes an unauthorized disclosure of personal data, creating a risk of misuse and violating data protection regulations and PostNL's internal security protocols. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. This involves recognizing potential conflicts of interest, understanding the implications of data handling, and knowing the appropriate reporting procedures within the organization. When faced with such a situation, the professional should ask, does this action align with PostNL's code of conduct and ethical values? Does this action comply with all applicable Dutch and EU data protection laws? What are the potential consequences of my actions for PostNL, its customers, and myself? If there is any doubt, the safest and most ethical course of action is to report the matter through official channels. Question 13. The risk matrix shows a moderate likelihood of a conflict of interest arising in the upcoming vendor selection for a new logistics software solution at PostNL due to a personal friendship between a key member of the selection committee and the owner of one of the bidding companies. What is the most appropriate course of action for the committee member? Option A. Discreetly provide the friend with insights into PostNL's specific requirements and evaluation criteria to help them tailor their bid more effectively. Option B. Immediately disclose the personal friendship to their direct manager and the head of procurement, and recuse themselves from all discussions and decisions related to the vendor selection process. Option C. Inform the friend about the selection process and encourage them to submit a bid, but assure them that their bid will be evaluated objectively alongside others. Option D. Proceed with the selection process, relying on their professional judgment to remain impartial and ensure the best vendor is chosen, as the friendship is purely personal and will not influence their decision. The correct answer is B. Immediately disclose the personal friendship to their direct manager and the head of procurement, and recuse themselves from all discussions and decisions related to the vendor selection process. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's operational needs with ethical considerations and regulatory compliance. The core tension lies in a potential conflict of interest and the obligation to act in the best interest of PostNL while adhering to its internal policies and external regulations. Careful judgment is required to navigate the personal relationship and its potential influence on business decisions. The correct approach involves transparently disclosing the personal relationship to the appropriate PostNL management and recusing oneself from any decision-making processes that could be influenced by this relationship. This upholds the ethical principle of avoiding conflicts of interest and ensures that PostNL's procurement decisions are made impartially, based on merit and value. Regulatory justification stems from general principles of good corporate governance and adherence to any specific PostNL policies on conflicts of interest, which are designed to prevent favoritism and maintain trust. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the vendor selection process without disclosure, assuming personal integrity will prevent bias. This fails to acknowledge the appearance of impropriety and the potential for unconscious bias, which can undermine trust and lead to suboptimal business outcomes for PostNL. It violates the ethical duty of loyalty to the employer and potentially breaches internal policies designed to safeguard against such conflicts. Another incorrect approach is to subtly steer the selection process toward the friend's company without explicit favoritism, believing this can be done discreetly. This is ethically unsound as it still involves manipulation and a lack of transparency, compromising the integrity of the procurement process. It also risks discovery, leading to reputational damage for both the individual and PostNL. A third incorrect approach is to inform the friend about the internal selection process and criteria to help them prepare a stronger bid. While seemingly helpful, this provides an unfair advantage to one vendor over others and breaches confidentiality. It is a direct violation of ethical conduct and PostNL's duty to ensure a fair and competitive procurement environment. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, integrity, and adherence to company policy and ethical codes. When a potential conflict of interest arises, the first step is to identify it. The next step is to consult relevant company policies and seek guidance from a supervisor or compliance department. The ultimate goal is to act in a manner that protects the company's interests and maintains public trust. Question 14. The investigation demonstrates that a new data analytics initiative at PostNL could potentially identify customer purchasing patterns that might be used to offer targeted advertising services to third-party businesses. This initiative, if implemented without careful consideration, could also reveal insights into competitor service levels based on delivery times and customer feedback data. What is the most appropriate course of action for PostNL to take regarding this data analytics initiative? Option A. Immediately implement the data analytics initiative to gain a competitive advantage and explore potential revenue streams, assuming that the data is already collected for operational purposes. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of PostNL's data handling policies and consult with legal counsel to ensure compliance with Dutch and EU data protection laws, e.g., GDPR, and competition regulations before proceeding with any aspect of the initiative. Option C. Seek external legal advice only if a customer or regulatory body raises a concern about the data usage after the initiative has been fully implemented. Option D. Proceed with analyzing customer purchasing patterns for targeted advertising, but refrain from analyzing competitor service levels to avoid potential legal scrutiny. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review of PostNL's data handling policies and consult with legal counsel to ensure compliance with Dutch and EU data protection laws e.g., GDPR, and competition regulations before proceeding with any aspect of the initiative. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential conflict between a company's operational efficiency goals and its ethical obligations regarding data privacy and fair competition. PostNL, as a logistics and postal service provider, handles a significant volume of customer data and operates in a competitive market. The challenge lies in balancing the desire to leverage data for service improvement and competitive advantage with the imperative to protect customer privacy and avoid anti-competitive practices. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any data utilization aligns with legal and ethical standards. The correct approach involves a thorough review of PostNL's internal data handling policies and relevant Dutch and EU regulations, specifically the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, and any applicable competition law guidelines. This approach prioritizes compliance and ethical conduct by seeking to understand the legal boundaries before making decisions. It demonstrates a commitment to responsible data management and fair business practices, which are crucial for maintaining customer trust and regulatory compliance. An incorrect approach that involves immediately implementing the new data analysis strategy without a comprehensive legal and ethical review risks violating data privacy rights. This could lead to significant fines under GDPR, reputational damage, and loss of customer confidence. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the potential ethical concerns and proceed based solely on perceived business benefits, demonstrates a disregard for regulatory obligations and ethical principles. This can result in severe legal repercussions and undermine the company's integrity. Finally, an approach that involves seeking external legal advice only after a potential issue has been identified is reactive rather than proactive and may not prevent initial breaches of compliance. Professionals should adopt a proactive decision-making framework that begins with understanding the regulatory landscape and ethical implications of any proposed action. This involves consulting internal compliance departments, legal counsel, and relevant regulatory guidance before implementation. When faced with a new opportunity that involves data or competitive strategy, the process should include 1. Identifying potential risks, legal, ethical, reputational. 2. Researching and understanding applicable laws and regulations. 3. Consulting with relevant experts, legal, compliance. 4. Developing a plan that mitigates identified risks and ensures compliance. 5. Regularly reviewing and updating practices to reflect changes in regulations or business operations. Question 15. The analysis reveals that a close friend of a PostNL employee asks for help tracking a package they sent, mentioning they are worried about its delivery status and would appreciate any inside information the employee might have. The employee has the technical capability to access tracking data for packages handled by PostNL. What is the most appropriate course of action for the PostNL employee in this situation? Option A. Politely explain to the friend that due to strict data privacy regulations and company policy, they cannot access or share any specific tracking information for packages unless they are the sender or recipient with a valid tracking number and legitimate reason, and offer to help the friend find the official tracking portal on the PostNL website. Option B. Access the tracking information for the friend's package and provide a general update, stating that it appears to be on schedule to alleviate their friend's concerns. Option C. Tell the friend that while they cannot directly access the information, they can ask a colleague in the dispatch department to discreetly check on the package status. Option D. Provide the friend with a generic tracking number that might lead them to a general status update on the PostNL website, hoping it satisfies their curiosity without revealing specific details. The correct answer is A. Politely explain to the friend that due to strict data privacy regulations and company policy, they cannot access or share any specific tracking information for packages unless they are the sender or recipient with a valid tracking number and legitimate reason, and offer to help the friend find the official tracking portal on the PostNL website. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a PostNL employee due to the potential conflict between personal relationships and professional integrity, specifically concerning the handling of sensitive customer information. The core of the dilemma lies in balancing the desire to assist a friend with the strict regulatory and ethical obligations to protect customer data and maintain fair business practices. Careful judgment is required to ensure that personal connections do not compromise the company's commitment to privacy and security. The correct approach involves strictly adhering to PostNL's internal policies and relevant Dutch data protection regulations, such as the Algemene Verordening-Gegevensbescherming, AVG, which is the Dutch implementation of the GDPR. This approach prioritizes the protection of customer data, ensuring that no unauthorized access or disclosure occurs, even when a personal relationship is involved. It upholds the ethical principle of impartiality and prevents any perception of favoritism or misuse of information. By refusing to access or share the tracking information without proper authorization and a legitimate business reason, the employee demonstrates a commitment to professional conduct and regulatory compliance. An incorrect approach would be to access the tracking information for the friend. This action would violate PostNL's internal data handling policies, which are designed to prevent unauthorized access to customer data. Furthermore, it would contravene the principles of the AVG, which mandates that personal data shall be processed lawfully, fairly, and in a transparent manner, and collected for specified, explicit, and legitimate purposes. Sharing this information without a valid business justification or the customer's explicit consent would constitute a breach of privacy and could lead to significant penalties for both the employee and PostNL. Another incorrect approach would be to provide a vague or misleading answer to the friend, implying that the information might be accessible but is difficult to obtain. This approach, while not directly violating data access policies, still skirts the ethical boundaries by creating a false impression and potentially encouraging the friend to pursue unauthorized means. It fails to uphold the professional standard of directness and transparency in dealing with such requests. A third incorrect approach would be to dismiss the friend's request rudely or without explanation. While it avoids the direct breach of data policies, it fails to demonstrate professional courtesy and could damage the company's reputation. A more constructive approach, even when refusing a request, is to explain the limitations and policies in a polite and professional manner. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of company policies and relevant regulations. When faced with a request that could potentially compromise these standards, the employee should first identify the core ethical and regulatory principles at stake. They should then consider the potential consequences of different actions, both for themselves, the company, and the customer. The decision should always lean towards upholding the highest standards of integrity, privacy, and compliance, even if it means disappointing a personal acquaintance. Seeking guidance from a supervisor or the company's compliance department is also a crucial step when in doubt. Question 16. Compliance review shows that a PostNL logistics manager has inadvertently accessed a confidential internal report detailing upcoming significant route changes and potential new service areas that could impact competitor operations. The manager is also an avid private investor and sees a potential personal financial opportunity based on this information. What is the most appropriate course of action for the PostNL manager? Option A. Proceed with the personal investment, as the information was accessed accidentally and not actively sought. Option B. Discuss the information with a trusted colleague to gauge their opinion on the investment before deciding what to do. Option C. Delete the confidential report and refrain from any further action, assuming the issue is resolved by forgetting about it. Option D. Immediately report the access to the confidential report and the potential personal investment opportunity to the PostNL Compliance Department. The correct answer is D. Immediately report the access to the confidential report and the potential personal investment opportunity to the PostNL Compliance Department. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves a potential conflict of interest and the misuse of confidential information within PostNL. The employee has access to sensitive data that could be used for personal gain, which directly contravenes ethical business practices and likely PostNL's internal policies, as well as general principles of data protection and fair competition. Careful judgment is required to navigate the ethical implications and ensure compliance with regulatory expectations. The correct approach involves immediately reporting the situation to the appropriate internal PostNL department, such as legal, compliance, or HR. This demonstrates integrity and adherence to PostNL's established procedures for handling potential ethical breaches. By reporting, the employee ensures that the company can investigate the matter appropriately, mitigate any risks, and take necessary corrective actions, thereby upholding PostNL's commitment to ethical conduct and data security. This aligns with the general expectation that employees will act in the best interest of the company and report any suspected misconduct. An incorrect approach of ignoring the situation and proceeding with the personal investment is ethically unsound and potentially illegal. It constitutes a failure to act with due diligence and could lead to insider trading or unfair market advantage, depending on the specifics of the information and the investment. This approach violates the trust placed in the employee by PostNL and could result in severe disciplinary action, including termination and potential legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach of discussing the information with colleagues before reporting is also problematic. While seemingly an attempt to seek advice, it risks further dissemination of confidential information, potentially creating more widespread ethical and legal issues for PostNL. It bypasses the formal reporting channels designed to handle such sensitive matters discreetly and effectively. A third incorrect approach of deleting the information and pretending it never happened is a direct attempt to conceal a potential ethical lapse. This is dishonest and undermines any attempt at transparency or accountability. It prevents PostNL from understanding the scope of the issue and implementing appropriate safeguards, thereby increasing the risk of future misconduct. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes integrity, adherence to company policy, and regulatory compliance. When faced with a potential ethical dilemma, the steps should be: 1. Recognize the ethical issue. 2. Consult relevant company policies and codes of conduct. 3. Report the issue through the designated internal channels. 4. Cooperate fully with any investigation. 5. Avoid any actions that could exacerbate the situation or create further conflicts of interest. Question 17. To address the challenge of a PostNL delivery driver allegedly using company time for personal deliveries for a third party, what is the most appropriate initial course of action for a PostNL supervisor? Option A. Immediately issue a formal warning to the driver and suspend their delivery route pending further review. Option B. Discuss the allegations with other drivers to gauge their opinions and gather anecdotal evidence. Option C. Ignore the report as it is likely a minor issue and unlikely to significantly impact PostNL operations. Option D. Conduct a discreet, fact-finding investigation, including reviewing delivery logs and potentially speaking with the driver, to gather objective information before deciding on any action. The correct answer is A. Immediately issue a formal warning to the driver and suspend their delivery route pending further review. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the company's operational needs with ethical considerations and potential regulatory compliance. The core dilemma lies in deciding how to handle a situation where a PostNL employee might be engaging in activities that could compromise the integrity of mail delivery or customer trust, even if not explicitly illegal. Careful judgment is required to ensure PostNL upholds its reputation for reliability and adheres to any relevant postal service regulations or internal codes of conduct. The correct approach involves a thorough, objective investigation into the employee's alleged activities. This means gathering all relevant facts, speaking with the employee, and consulting internal policies and any applicable PostNL guidelines or regulatory frameworks governing employee conduct and service delivery. This approach is right because it prioritizes due process, fairness to the employee, and adherence to established procedures. It allows PostNL to make an informed decision based on evidence rather than speculation, and ensures that any action taken is justifiable and compliant with internal standards and potentially external postal regulations. This methodical process helps maintain employee morale and prevents hasty, potentially unfair disciplinary actions. An incorrect approach would be to immediately dismiss the employee based on a single report without investigation. This fails to uphold principles of fairness and due process, potentially leading to wrongful termination and legal repercussions. It also bypasses established internal procedures for handling employee misconduct, which are likely in place to ensure consistency and compliance. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the report altogether, assuming it is trivial. This is ethically unsound and could expose PostNL to significant risks if the allegations are true, potentially damaging its reputation and leading to regulatory scrutiny for failing to ensure the integrity of its services. Finally, confronting the employee publicly or spreading rumors about the situation before a proper investigation is also professionally unacceptable. This constitutes a breach of confidentiality, can create a hostile work environment, and undermines the investigation process by potentially influencing witness accounts or the employee's ability to respond fairly. Professionals should approach such situations by activating a structured decision-making framework. This typically involves 1. Acknowledging the report and its potential seriousness. 2. Initiating a confidential and objective investigation. 3. Reviewing relevant company policies, codes of conduct, and any applicable regulatory guidelines. 4. Gathering evidence and speaking with all parties involved. 5. assessing the findings against established criteria. 6. Determining the appropriate course of action based on the evidence and policies, ensuring fairness and compliance. 7. Documenting the entire process. Question 18. The review process indicates a discrepancy in delivery data for a significant batch of parcels handled by PostNL, potentially impacting customer satisfaction and operational efficiency. You have identified a way to manually adjust the data to reflect a more accurate outcome, which would resolve the immediate issue and prevent potential customer complaints. However, you are not authorized to make such direct data modifications. Option A. Discuss the data discrepancy with trusted colleagues to brainstorm informal solutions that could quickly rectify the situation without involving formal channels. Option B. Immediately escalate the data discrepancy to your direct supervisor and the relevant compliance department, providing all details of the identified issue and your proposed solution, while awaiting their guidance before taking any action. Option C. Ignore the data discrepancy, assuming it is a minor error that will likely be corrected by automated systems or will not significantly impact PostNL's operations. Option D. Proceed with manually adjusting the delivery data to correct the discrepancy, as your intention is to improve accuracy and customer experience for PostNL. Correct answer is B. Immediately escalate the data discrepancy to your direct supervisor and the relevant compliance department, providing all details of the identified issue and your proposed solution, while awaiting their guidance before taking any action. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves a potential conflict between a company's operational needs and the ethical obligation to maintain data integrity and customer trust. PostNL, as a logistics and postal service provider, handles sensitive customer information and relies on accurate data for its operations. The temptation to manipulate data, even with good intentions, can have severe repercussions. Careful judgment is required to navigate this situation ethically and legally. The correct approach involves immediately escalating the issue to the appropriate internal channels, such as the compliance department or a designated data protection officer, and refraining from any unauthorized data manipulation. This upholds PostNL's commitment to data accuracy and privacy, which are foundational to its business and regulatory compliance. Specifically, this aligns with general principles of data governance and the ethical responsibilities of employees to act with integrity. While specific PostNL internal policies would guide the exact escalation path, the principle of seeking authorized guidance before taking action is paramount. This approach ensures that any necessary data corrections are handled transparently, compliantly, and with the necessary oversight, preventing potential breaches of trust or regulatory violations. An incorrect approach of attempting to correct the data without authorization, even with the intention of improving efficiency, is professionally unacceptable. This bypasses established procedures and could lead to further data corruption or misrepresentation. It undermines the integrity of PostNL systems and could violate internal data handling policies and potentially data protection regulations if customer data is involved. Another incorrect approach of ignoring the discrepancy and hoping it resolves itself is also professionally unsound. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and responsibility. It allows potential inaccuracies to persist, which could lead to operational errors, customer dissatisfaction, and reputational damage for PostNL. It also fails to address a known issue that could have downstream consequences. Finally, an incorrect approach of discussing the issue with colleagues outside of the designated reporting structure before escalating could lead to the spread of misinformation or the formation of informal, potentially non-compliant solutions. This can create a culture where established procedures are circumvented, increasing the risk of errors and ethical breaches. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Recognizing the potential ethical or compliance issue. 2. Consulting internal policies and procedures for guidance. 3. Escalating the issue to the appropriate authority or department. 4. Refraining from taking unilateral action that could have negative consequences. 5. Documenting all actions and communications related to the issue. Question 19. What factors determine the appropriate course of action for a PostNL employee when a close friend applies for a position within the company and the employee is involved in the hiring process? Option A. The employee's seniority within PostNL and their perceived influence over the hiring manager. Option B. The employee's desire to help their friend secure employment and the perceived minimal impact on the hiring process. Option C. PostNL's internal policies on conflicts of interest and ethical conduct in recruitment, coupled with a commitment to objective evaluation. Option D. The employee's personal assessment of the friend's qualifications and the likelihood of their success in the role. The correct answer is D. The employee's personal assessment of the friend's qualifications and the likelihood of their success in the role. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a PostNL employee due to the potential conflict between personal relationships and the company's commitment to fair and transparent hiring practices. The core of the dilemma lies in maintaining objectivity and integrity when a close acquaintance is a candidate. Careful judgment is required to ensure that PostNL's recruitment processes are not compromised, thereby upholding the company's reputation and the trust placed in its hiring decisions. The correct approach involves adhering strictly to PostNL's internal policies and ethical guidelines regarding recruitment and conflicts of interest. This means disclosing the personal relationship to the appropriate HR personnel or hiring manager and recusing oneself from any part of the selection process involving the acquaintance. This approach is ethically sound and aligns with regulatory expectations for fair employment practices, ensuring that all candidates are evaluated solely on their merits and qualifications, without undue influence. It demonstrates professionalism and a commitment to the integrity of the hiring process, preventing any perception of favoritism or bias. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with evaluating the acquaintance's application without disclosure, potentially influencing the outcome based on the personal relationship. This failure to disclose a conflict of interest violates ethical principles of fairness and transparency. It could lead to a perception of nepotism or favoritism, undermining the credibility of PostNL's hiring process and potentially resulting in legal challenges or damage to the company's reputation. Another incorrect approach would be to subtly disadvantage the acquaintance to appear unbiased, which is also a form of manipulation and violates the principle of objective evaluation. This still involves allowing the personal relationship to improperly influence the decision-making process, albeit in a negative direction. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and adherence to company policy. When faced with a potential conflict of interest, the first step is to recognize the situation and its implications. Subsequently, consult relevant company policies and guidelines. The next crucial step is to proactively disclose the conflict to the appropriate authority, e.g., HR, direct manager, and seek guidance on how to proceed. This typically involves recusal from any decision-making or evaluative role concerning the individual with whom the conflict exists. Maintaining open communication and documenting the steps taken are also vital components of this process. Question 20. System analysis indicates that a colleague at PostNL, working on a time-sensitive customer issue, approaches you for immediate access to the customer database to retrieve specific delivery details. Your colleague states they are in a hurry and cannot go through the standard request procedure. You have direct access to this database. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Politely decline the request, explaining that direct access is not permitted due to privacy regulations, and offer to help retrieve the information through the correct approved channels. Option B. Ignore your colleague's request and continue with your own work. Option C. Grant your colleague direct access to the customer database to allow them to quickly find the information they need. Option D. Provide the requested delivery details verbally to your colleague, without verifying their authorization or the legitimacy of the request. The correct answer is A. Politely decline the request, explaining that direct access is not permitted due to privacy regulations, and offer to help retrieve the information through the correct, approved channels. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a PostNL employee regarding the handling of sensitive customer data. The core of the dilemma lies in balancing the immediate need to assist a colleague with the absolute imperative to protect customer privacy and comply with data protection regulations. The pressure to be helpful can conflict with the duty of care owed to customers, requiring careful judgment to avoid unauthorized disclosure. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves politely but firmly declining the request for direct access to customer data, explaining that it is not permissible due to privacy regulations. This upholds the principle of data minimization and the right to privacy for PostNL customers. By offering to assist the colleague through approved channels, such as retrieving specific, anonymized information if appropriate or guiding them to the correct procedure. The employee demonstrates a commitment to both collegiality and regulatory compliance. This aligns with the ethical duty to act with integrity and to safeguard confidential information, as expected within a regulated industry like postal services. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to grant direct access to the customer database. This is a direct violation of data protection laws and PostNL's internal policies. It exposes customer data to unauthorized viewing, increasing the risk of breaches, identity theft, and misuse of personal information. Ethically, it betrays the trust placed in PostNL by its customers. Another incorrect approach is to provide the requested information verbally, without verifying the colleague's authorization or the legitimacy of the request. This circumvents proper data access protocols and still constitutes an unauthorized disclosure of sensitive information. It fails to adhere to the principle of accountability and can lead to data being used for unintended or improper purposes. A third incorrect approach is to ignore the request entirely without explanation. While it avoids direct violation, it can create a negative work environment and fail to educate the colleague about proper procedures. It does not proactively address the potential for future breaches and misses an opportunity to reinforce data protection standards within the team. Professional reasoning. Professionals in roles handling customer data must adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. This involves 1. Identifying the core issue. Is the request compliant with data protection laws and company policy? 2. Assessing the risks. What are the potential consequences of fulfilling or denying the request? 3. Consulting policies and procedures, referencing relevant data protection regulations, e.g., GDPR if applicable to PostNL's operations, and internal PostNL guidelines. 4. Communicating clearly and professionally, explaining the rationale for any decision, especially when denying a request and offering alternative compliance solutions. 5. Escalating if necessary, if unsure or if the situation involves potential serious breaches, seeking guidance from supervisors or compliance officers.